Do you know what time it is? It's Supernatural StoryTime. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Stories to listen to while you drive, Volume 2. I was an over-the-road truck driver for 3.5 years. I could say that I don't miss the 11-hour days, if you're running strictly under DOT guidelines, dragging a 53-foot trailer from one side of the country to the other. That I don't miss being out on the open road for sometimes 6 weeks at a stretch, crashing at the shittiest looking truck stops out in the middle of nowhere, eating the most unhealthy food imaginable, but I do. The things I don't miss are the creepy things I encountered in my travels. In this country, according to the Department of Transportation, there are about 3,980,817 miles of roads in the United States, 2,605,331 miles paved, and 1,375,486 miles unpaved. With that much road, there are plenty out-of-the-way places for hokey shit to go down. Truck stops are places to rest, refuel, and exchange stories. But mostly, you'll only hear the stories that will make you laugh or the occasional grievance against the establishment. I use the word occasional with sarcasm because there's nothing truckers love to do more than bitch about all the rules and regulations that keep them from making a decent living. The stories you hardly ever hear are the ones that most guys won't tell you unless they're half in the bag or they know you really well. When it comes to those stories, truckers are a fairly guarded bunch. You know the drill. Names changed to protect all parties involved and all that. I knew a driver named Hank. I'll call him that because this man loved his Hank Williams Jr. When he told me this story, he was in his late 60s and had about 3 million miles under his belt. You only get those kind of miles if you've been driving most of your life. Hank, along with his love for outlaw country, happened to have a deep, abiding love for getting side jobs that allowed him to make a living without the man dipping into his pockets too deeply. Hank was an owner-operator, meaning he owned his own truck and ran his own business out of said truck. A beautifully restored and modified 1969 Peterbilt 359 conventional. Hank knew the old-school way of running with 2 sets of logbooks, analog, to play around with the hours and miles restrictions put in place by the DOT for yours and our safety. He knew all the back routes that, by DOT standards, were barely legal for a truck this size to negotiate. It was on one of those so-called side runs where Hank said he saw something. Well, let me get to that. Hank said he was running one such job between Three Forks, Montana and Twin Falls, Idaho, in the dead of winter at that time of year. The route he was taking, US 287, could be hit or miss on if it was properly plowed. But for the money he was getting paid for this haul, he was willing to risk it. The route at times runs along the western edge of the Shoshone National Forest and West Yellowstone National Park, with winding mountain passes and spectacular views if you drive it during the day, even in the winter. Hank said on this run the roads had been plowed within the last 6 hours, which was doable but barely optimal conditions, with drifts of snow on the sides of the road from the plow sometimes reaching heights upward of 15 to 17 feet. There was scant room for pulling over should the need arise to do repairs or take a piss. Hank was rolling through this area, he says, around 2 a.m. There was cloud cover, so it would have been pitch black had the snow not turned it into a grayish moonscape beyond the range of the headlights. The temperature on the dashboard read a bristling 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice crystals bordered the windows at these temperatures. If you turned off your truck for too long, your diesel fuel would gel and you weren't going anywhere without an expensive thaw-out. Hank shivered as he recounted that night. I was rolling along at steady 62 miles per hour, which I reckon might have been a tad too fast for the conditions. Money will make you do some stupid things. Hank said he'd been drinking Mountain Dew and chain smoking to stay awake through the night, so it was no surprise to him when he had to answer the call of nature. He pulled over to the side of the road, or as far off the roadway as he could without getting stuck in the deep snowdrifts. clambered over to the passenger side door and opened it to piss directly off the top step-up. When it's that cold out, you gotta hold on tight or your pecker will go full turtle on you and you'll piss all over your britches, he said with a guffaw of laughter. Ain't no sense in getting all the way down if it's just a quick stop. As he told me the rest, it was without his trademark crooked grin. Now, when I say it was cold out, I don't mean it was Arctic-like, but it was more damp than you'd expect at that temperature. I didn't hear a damn thing. No wind, nothing, aside from my piss hitting the snowbank. He lit another cigarette and inhaled deeply. It was damn eerie, and it weren't the cold giving me goose pimples. I shook the dew off the lily, zipped up, and I got the hell out of there. About a half hour later, I'm back to routine, got nothing but the CB radio on, 'cause the FM and AM ain't worth a goddamn up there. That radio was quiet too, as I reckon weren't any other damn fool out running these parts this time of night. Hank shifted uncomfortably in his seat and drank something from his flask. I heard something about made me jump out of my skin and shit myself to boot. Now, I am used to hearing the occasional bang or rattle as you pick up road debris or some shit like that. Part of my brain thought it must have been my wheels picked up a chunk of ice and it were bouncing round between the cab and the trailer. But then I heard it again. Real distinct like. Knock, knock, knock. Steady and like someone was knocking on the door wanted in. Hank sat up at this point and his eyes bore into me. You can bet your sweet ass there weren't no way in hell I'm gonna stop out in the middle of nowhere and see who the fuck is hanging outside my truck. Knocking nice as you like. No, sir. So I stepped on the gas, devil be damned, and hightailed it. Hank was getting a bit agitated, so I handed him some of my moonshine, hoping it'd calm down his nerves. Them knocks was coming pretty regularly over the next 3 hours as I shagged ass to Twin Falls, louder and more insistent as we went. By the time I was 50 miles from town and finally picking up some CB chatter, there was knocking real loud. Hank banged his fist on the table to illustrate how loud. Knock, knock, knock. By this time, I'm not sure if I should be more pissed off or terrified. This motherfucker's banging on my cab hard enough to dent it. So I got on the mic and asked if there was anybody around who could drive by my rig to see what the hell is going on. You know, if they could just see anything on my catwalk. Everybody was either in a stopper or headed out the area on the opposite side of town. I figure I'll just get to the nearest truck stop where there's lighting and folks around to look for myself. I slowed for the stoplights, 'cause I sure as hell weren't stopping for shit before I had some civilization around me. Hank took another cigarette and lit it before continuing. I finally came to a red light. There weren't no one around, so I slowed down and rolled through that sumbitch. Got another knock for my efforts and I about squeezed the turd out because I think the motherfucker was whispering at me. About 10 minutes later, I pulled into a truck stop, all the way into the fuel area where there was bright lights. I jumped out my cab with my .45 in hand and circled around the catwalk, giving it a wide berth. There wasn't hide nor hair of anything or anyone. I looked under the rig to make sure someone wasn't sneaking off. Nothing. I climbed up the catwalk after getting my flashlight to inspect the damage to the back of my cab. Turned to scratch on my rig. I couldn't sleep for at least a day after that bullshit. Turned in the load and went back to the truck stop and had a few drinks. I was about to thank Hank for his story and go back to my own truck when he grabbed my wrist. That's not the end of it, son. I hear tell that next spring when the snow melted, they found a hitchhiker about 50 feet off the road up on US 287. No mention of his cause of death. But where they found him, round about the area where I stopped for that piss. Nowadays, I piss in bottles and don't stop for shit less I'm around other folks. Needless to say, I don't stop in the middle of nowhere for anything much either these days. Story number 2. For those of you not hip to trucker lingo, there's a group of folks we refer to as lot lizards. What's a lot lizard, you might ask? Well, a lot lizard is a prostitute that works truck stops, rest areas, or any other area where large groups of travelers might stop for some R&R. Most of these wretched creatures are addicts or alcoholics just doing this to afford their next fix. But many of them are just people who are down on their luck, who see no other way to support themselves. Some consider themselves unemployable and think the only way to get by is to use the only thing they have available to them, their bodies. There are some that do this as a side job, when the meager wages for their full-time gig doesn't make ends meet. They turn to this. I was parked at a large truck stop about 45 miles outside Montgomery, Alabama. I just finished a long day of driving and was on the phone with my wife, my second ex-wife now, for our nightly check-in, I miss you call. It was a balmy early summer night as I sat there eating my Subway and chatting with the missus. My driver's door opened to let in the breeze. A young lady walked up to my truck and asked if she could clean my truck for me. I looked at her. She was a wayfish young thing, didn't look a day over 16. She looked desperate as well. "What was that?" Crystal asked in my headset. "Hold on, hun." I turned to the young lady and said, "I'm sorry, miss, I'm not interested." I pointed to the Bluetooth headset in my ear. "And if you don't mind moving on along, I'm on the phone with my wife." With a downtrodden look, the young lady moved on. Apparently my neighbor was in need of a truck cleaning. I heard laughter in my headset. "Did you just get propositioned by a hooker? Was she cute?" Crystal laughed a little harder. I said, "Yeah, I think I did, and yes, she actually was cute, but way too young for my taste. Looked like she should be doing homework under the watchful eye of her parents." I shuddered involuntarily as I thought of my own daughters, 1,000 miles away with their mother, first wife. Crystal's voice snapped me back to reality. "Ew, seriously? People are disgusting. I still want to puke when I think about that last lizard sighting you told me about." I'd been in Amarillo. I had told her how I'd watched from across the lot as a cracked-out-looking lot lizard had gone down the line of trucks, 5 or 6 in a row without being turned down. She'd climb in the first, then 20 minutes later she'd step from that truck to the next, her feet not even touching the ground, and chatted up the next driver. In she went, the truck rocking slightly for about 15 minutes before I watched her lather, rinse, and repeat this process over the next 2 hours, minus the lather and rinse. Blah. I got off the phone with Crystal. She told me she'd call me in the morning on her way to work, hugs and kisses and all that jazz. I cleaned up my sandwich mess and grabbed my towel and toiletry bag and went in for a shower. Clean and refreshed, I climbed back into my truck to do some reading and get some sleep. I still smoked at this time, so I had the small vent on my sleeper open to let in fresh air. I heard a brief commotion from the truck parked next to me, followed by the opening and closing of a door, then sound of angry muttering and hard-soled shoes walking away. My curiosity got the better of me, so I got up and poked my head through the heavy blackout curtains that separates the sleeper from the rest of the truck cab. In my passenger side mirror, I glimpsed a tall, bulky figure walking towards the truck stop proper between our trailers, smoke billowing around the silhouette of a trucker's hat atop his large head. He soon disappeared from my view. I was about to go back to my bunk when the truck next to me rocked a little. A small figure came out from the sleeper area and fumbled with the door until it opened. I watched as the girl I'd seen earlier climbed down to the ground. She wasn't wearing shoes. Of course, I wasn't paying that close of attention when she'd come up to me earlier. She may have been barefoot then as well. She turned her head and she saw me. I saw her more clearly now. Her face was a bit swollen on the left side, a large red welt the size of a softball, but the shape of a fist presented itself. I started toward my door to assist her, but she raised a finger to her lips and shook her head, tears in her eyes. She took off like a bat out of hell and ran towards the woods that bordered one side of the truck stop. The driver of that rig came back to his truck about 5 minutes later. I watched from the darkness of my cab as the guy searched frantically around the surrounding area for the next 20 minutes. He climbed into his truck and left in a hurry shortly after that. I probably should have called the authorities before that, but the look on that girl's face convinced me not to intercede for some reason. A few weeks later, the news was abuzz with the discovery of a young woman's body near a truck stop in Alabama. The picture they flashed of the girl made my heart stop. She was the spitting image of the wayfish truck cleaner I'd encountered that balmy night. The FBI's Highway and Serial Killings Initiative stated in a TV interview that 2 things linking this girl to a string of 12 other possible homicides across 5 states were the size of bruises on their faces and the fact that they had all been found without their shoes. I wonder to this day if I'd ignored the girl's plea for silence, would she still be alive today? Number 3. Sometimes, if you're lucky, or not, and you happen to have a passport since 9/11, you may be tasked with delivering cargo into Canada or Mexico. Canada is the obvious choice for most folks, but sometimes you don't get to choose. Carlos is a driver I knew for a number of years, both on the truck and off. Guess who his favorite guitarist is? His grandparents were still in Guadalajara, Mexico, and his folks had come to the U.S. legally, no less, and settled in El Paso, Texas, about 3 years before he was born. Carlos hauled freight for a small privately owned company based in Corpus Christi, a fleet of about 10 trucks that specialized in what he called private freight, which probably meant either government or very rich clientele. 90% of the time, Carlos never saw a detailed bill of lading. He just got the basic and most essential info like weight and whether or not it was a hazmat. Carlos said most of his hauls rarely left Texas or the surrounding states, but on one particular run, he was required to drive their load all the way up to South Dakota, and he'd be sharing the ride with another gentleman that was there for his safety. This hombre was a type that don't say much, basically said, "Pretend I'm not here." I thought it was kind of rude to be like, "Hey, I'm going to be in this truck with you for about 1,300 miles, but don't try to talk to me." Carlos took a swig of his Deschutes Brewery Obsidian Stout. For a man of little other taste, he's a remarkable beer snob, which is one of the many reasons we get along. So we hit the road, and every time we hit a DOT stop or scale, this pendejo, who's got all the paperwork, tells me to stay put. He walks in, and less than a minute later, without a word, he's back in the truck, and we're rolling again. Carlos said the first day went off without any problems or missteps. His quiet, and in my opinion, a bit menacing, from the description passenger kept to himself until Carlos mentioned stopping for the night as he pulled into a truck stop just outside Colorado Springs. Calero pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to me. He said, "After fueling, go to this address. Turn off your phone and all GPS devices." That was it. I followed the directions to a joint about 9 miles off I-25 and was ushered into a big metal storage facility, like a hangar or something. They had me drop the trailer and park my rig out in the dirt lot. Culo man stayed with the trailer, and I went to sack out in my sleeper. I grabbed him another beer out of my fridge, and along with whiskey for me, I sat back down and Carlos continued. So the next morning, tall, dark, and feo wakes me up with a knock on the side of my sleeper. "Let's go," he says. I get up and get dressed, go take a piss, and bring the rig back into the hangar. This is where shit gets weird. There's another trailer next to mine. I can't tell if he's nervous or pissed as he continues. "These fucking putos tell me there's been damage to your trailer. We will repair and or replace it before you make your return trip. There's a tarp over part of my trailer and what looks like fluid of a sort or on the back floor of the hangar." I was only allowed to get out to the truck to do a quick glance at my new trailer. Fucking thing was brand new. Beautiful, man. I barely thought about what might have damaged my trailer, but in the back of my cabeza I'm thinking, what the fuck am I hauling, man? I forgot to mention at the beginning the weight of the cargo. For a little explanation, I'll try to be as brief as possible so I can get back to the story. Now, a regular rig with a sleeper weighs from 17,000 to 22,000 pounds, depending on certain variables, and an average regular trailer weighs about 10,000 pounds empty. When he began his trip, Carlos said his total weight was about 55,000 pounds, and he was rolling easily. Any trucker worth his salt knows when there's a difference in weight just by the way it pulls. This chingon was heavy as a motherfucker, brother. I started to drive it out of the hangar, and it was putting a little strain on my rig. It's like if you've been swinging an aluminum bat for years and someone suddenly hands you a wooden bat with a lead core. I stopped and hopped out, thinking maybe those fucksticks had attached the air hoses wrong and the brakes weren't disengaging properly. They looked all right, but I grabbed the hoses and repositioned them anyway. I was about to walk back and check the brakes visually, and the pinche puto hops out and gets in my fucking face. "Carlos, get back in the truck now." I tell him, "Look, vato, I'm not going to fucking any place until I know this trailer is safe to roll." I knocked on the side of the trailer to illustrate my irritation, and that fucker was solid, like steel plating instead of aluminum. And when the trailer fucking rocked, like there was something inside that moved on its own, brother. What the fuck was that? "Pinche no mames, cabrón," I backed away from the trailer and Ugly pulled out a fucking pistol, man. He's real shifty all of a sudden. He says, "Carlos, please, get back on the truck and let's get rolling." Dude looks scared. So I'm not playing. I get in the truck and we roll the fuck out. He tells me to follow directions, and as soon as we're back on the highway, I can turn my phone and GPS back on. He still looked nervous as he pulled out his phone and began texting someone at light speed, and he kept looking in his rear view. I don't know who he was talking to or what he said, but all the way stations we passed from there on out were closed, which is super crazy. When we got through Cheyenne, Wyoming, we hopped off I-25 onto US 85 and then took US 18 split at Mule Creek Junction and took that into southwestern South Dakota. After that, he told me to take SR 87 north, and I lose track of all the little roads we turned on. I had my phone and GPS shut down again, so I'm thoroughly fucking lost, man. We were bumping down some hard-packed dirt roads when the trailer lurched to the left. I don't mean sway or drift. That fucking thing, that tires came off the ground, moved about 3 feet to the left, and thud, came back to the earth, man. We're talking maximum pucker factor, brother. My asshole damn near tore a chunk out of my seat. Carlos got his own fucking beer because I couldn't move, riveted like a kid hearing a story from Grandpa and trying to remember to scribble notes. So, Duff Lunkhead next to me screams like some goddamn puta that's just got her cherry poked. Stop laughing, bro. He pulls out his phone and starts yelling into it. I'm too busy trying to keep the rig on the road to pay attention to him. By now, I'm probably screaming like a little bitch while this armored trailer's hopping around like whatever is in there really wants out. Que chingao. Dude told me to stop the truck, and I said, "Pendejo? Us rolling is the only thing keeping the truck upright." He just kind of paled and got quiet as we bounced along, now at a blistering 25 miles per hour. He jerked up as in the distance we could see black dots on the horizon heading our way. I shit you not, brother. Fucking helicopters. Blackhawks, I think. Anyway, these choppers come up and land about half a mile ahead of us. I slowed until I got about 100 yards out and I stopped. King Kong or whatever the fuck was in the trailer was not happy about the noise. I thought for sure the thing was gonna tip. I never got to find out. I felt a sharp pain in my neck and it was lights out, papi. I woke up in my sleep at a truck stop outside Cheyenne. I had my old trailer back, good as new, and 3 messages on my phone when I turned it on. 2 from mi madre and 1 from the jefe, telling me to get my culo back to El Paso to pick up a load by Friday. I checked my GPS and it was blank, man. Not reset. Blank. They wrecked my shit. I was kind of pissed until I checked my banco. Whoever they were, they bought my silence, more or less. Carlos smiled and handed me another beer. Number 4. I've had the pleasure of seeing this country behind the wheels of cars and semis alike, and while I didn't mind the vacationing in a car, I love the view through the windshield of a big rig much better. There's nothing, in my opinion, that beats the elevated view from that lofty perch. I can't tell you how many times ladies have been kind enough to grace me with a peek at their lovely tits. How many asses I've seen either pressed against glass or hanging out a window. I once even had a busload of hilarious gay gentlemen hang dong on me for a 4-mile stretch of I-84 on the border of Oregon and Washington. Nothing like the incongruity of the beauty of the Columbia River on one side of the truck and a bunch of swinging dicks out the other window. I was flattered, really. There's even been the occasion where I've looked down upon a passing vehicle to see the driver of the passing vehicle receiving sexual favors. The sight of someone getting a handy or roadhead seems like it be so out of the ordinary, but it's more common than you think, particularly from this vantage point. If you've traveled this country at all, particularly the Southwest, you know that there are vast stretches of highway and other roads that are straight as a arrow for 30 to 50 miles at a stretch. These roads are dangerous in the respect that you can zone out really easily. Some people get hypnotized by sight of mile after mile rolling along, seemingly endlessly, particularly at night, as the next hill reveals just more straight road. You begin to hope for a change in landscape, a slight bend in the road, a full-on curve, dead-end, construction, anything. It was on a stretch of road like this that I found the strangest truck stop I'd ever seen. I was cutting across a portion of Arizona desert to avoid a huge delay traffic jam caused by construction on I-10 heading into Phoenix. I'd taken Arizona 79 or the Pinal Pioneer Parkway, which splits off of Arizona 77 at Oracle Junction. If you stay on Arizona 77 to Oracle, you'll see signs for Biosphere 2, just in case you're ever in the area. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and I'd been rolling all day. I knew it wasn't too much further to Phoenix, but I knew at this time of night there'd be little to no spots left to park anywhere in the vicinity. I was starting to get a good road stare going as my eyelids got droopy. I saw a sign for a small truck stop 3 miles ahead, and I thought it'd be a good place as any to lay my head for the rest of the night. Welcome to En Medio de la Nada truck stop in Taqueria. It was one of those old school signs that was lit with hundreds of tiny light bulbs, as opposed to the more modern neon or one of those high-tech digital billboards. The place was a bit dingy on the outside and a little run down, but the lighting coming from inside spoke of a certain welcoming feeling, like the light of a cabin in the wilderness, a soft fire after hours in the cold. I turned into the gravel lot, past the antiquated yet novel glass-topped pumps, and parked in the nearly deserted lot to the rear of the large building. I'd seen a sign at the entrance that read, "Hot showers and laundry," so I grabbed my toiletry kit, a towel, and a bag of my dirty laundry to run the load, since I'd been on the road for 2 weeks straight and the sleeper compartment was starting to get a bit ripe. I walked through the short entryway and my senses were assaulted by some of the brightest, gaudiest colors imaginable. Bright lime green countertops stood out from the dark red plaid patterned floor like a clown had vomited on a lumberjack. The stools lining the counter were veritable freakish rainbows of pastels. This freak show was presided over by a middle-aged woman. I'm guessing her age was probably about 50, 55. She was tall, stately even, and the bright lighting gave her features an almost fuzzy quality. The frizz of her tightly curled red hair did nothing to soften this effect. Where I'd been expecting a twang, I got more of a southern Brooklyn accent. "What can we do for you, hon?" "We?" It was then that I noticed a massive, bald-headed bull of a man through the hole in the wall, wearing a grease-stained apron. He had watery eyes and an almost malevolent expression under his Cro-Magnon brow. His head topped off by a crisp paper hat that was too small for his head, in what would have been a comical way had the rest of his expressions not been so menacing. I cleared my throat and mustered a hearty, "I'd like the use of one of your showers, and I'll grab a bite afterwards. That is, if the kitchen is open all night." "Oh, and some change for the laundry?" Ruth, according to her name tag, said, "Sure, darling. Shower's $3. We'll have the grill fired up for you when you're ready." I handed her a $5 bill, and she gave the appropriate change, all in quarters, and smiled at me as her hand touched mine. Her fingers were like ice, but her smile was something else. I followed Ruth's directions through the labyrinth hallway to the door number corresponding to the small key she'd handed me, with a gothic-looking number 3 engraved into it. I'm glad I don't have a fear of clowns. As I opened the door, I was treated to what looked like a mosaic painted by John Wayne Gacy himself. I finally understood how someone could acquire fear of clowns, no matter how jovial the subjects of the decor might be. I relieved myself and quickly undressed. I didn't want to spend any more time in this room than I needed to. I lathered my face for a shave, and as I progressed around my face, I got the feeling I was being watched. I took a second to look around at the dozens of clowns' eyes watching my every movement. It was a bit unnerving, as they had been painted with that effect that made it seem as if they followed you everywhere you went. I finished shaving and hopped in the shower. The water pressure was perfect, and the steamy water blasted my tired muscles as I washed. Got out and toweled off, donning my last pair of clean everything, and then followed the gaudy neon-colored signs down more hallways. How big is this place? I thought to myself, not for the first time. I finally found the door-marked laundry room and made my way inside. I was brought to a halt by the sight of a young red-headed woman being fucked. Bent over one of the stainless steel clothes folding tables, the skirt of her waitress uniform hiked up over her hips, one hand a death grip on the edge of the table, the other reaching between her legs, grasping her partner's balls, pulling him into her with her violent thrust as he came into her. Caught somewhere between embarrassed and aroused, I cleared my throat to make myself known to the amorous couple. The guy, all of probably 6 feet and 230 pounds of him, turned his head at the sound and looked directly into my eyes, and laughed. "Aw, shit, Ellie, we got an audience." The girl turned and smiled, her eyes a mix of lusty and drug-induced hazes. She brought out a stickly-looking finger to her lips and slurred, "Don't tell my mama, or I'm like to get an ass-whooping." I gave them the universal signal for zipping my lips and tossing the keys as they shuffled by me. Ellie trailed her hand, the one that had been gripping the table, thankfully, across my chest as she passed and gave a sweet nighty-night, mister, as the door closed on her. What the fuck, I thought to myself. A few things came to mind, like, how old was that girl? The guy who'd been fucking her looked to be in his mid-20s, but she looked younger. Too young for me. Maybe it was hard to tell with the state she was in. It was a little disturbing. I shook the thoughts from my head and threw all my laundry into one washer along with one of the detergent pods I'd carried on the truck. I made my way back out to the diner portion of the building and parked myself at the counter. Ruth was there reading a paper and hopped to her feet, grabbing a menu and a coffee cup to place in front of me. Decaf, please. I'm hitting the hay as soon as my clothes are done. Ruth reached over and grabbed the orange-topped carafe, pouring me a cup. I ordered the open-faced chorizo sandwich with mashed potatoes and broccoli on the side. McGilla Gorilla in the kitchen had been staring at me the whole time. Jerry, you heard what he wants. Come on now. Jerry lumbered out of view, and I could soon hear and smell the sweet smells of your average greasy spoon diner. My mouth was watering. I was trading pleasantries with Ruth when I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Not because of anything spooky, but because someone had blown gently behind my left ear. I whipped my head around to be greeted by the smiling face of Ellie. Well, howdy again, mister. I turned back to Ruth, who had a rather dour look on her face. Mama, this nice young man was kind enough to hold the door for me as I was leaving the laundry room not 10 minutes ago. Ruth tilted her head a bit and said, This is my daughter, Ellie. Just turned 19 and is leaving us for college come the fall. She's our pride and joy. A truly genuine smile suffused her face, making her look 20 years younger, and I could see where Ellie got her looks. The guy I'd seen in the laundry room with Ellie came sauntering in with the easy grace of the careless. And this, Ruth said with an acidic bite of distaste in her voice, is our son, Eamon. He runs the garage out back. Too much cunning and not enough sense, that one. I felt instantly uncomfortable and a bit disgusted that I walked in on a scene of incest earlier. Oh, Mama, you telling people stories of praise for your young'uns again? He draped an arm over Ellie's shoulder, and the pair locked eyes with me. This the guy held the door for you, sis? Ellie slowly nodded her head in response. We don't get much in the way of gentlemen out this way, Eamon said with a grin as greasy as Jerry's apron. I took the opportunity to excuse myself to check the laundry. The washer was done, so I threw everything into 2 dryers to cut the drying time in half. I set the timer on my phone for 1 hour to come back and check on the clothes. As I walked back to the diner, I overheard a snippet of whispered conversation in one of the rooms I passed. Ain't gonna tell Mama, unless he wants to know all our secrets. Now you tell. I walked on quickly and took my seat back at the counter. Ruth was just picking up my plate from the window and bringing it over. Against my better judgment, Jerry was a superb cook, and I told him so as he stared vacantly through the window. My praise made Jerry smile bigger than I thought was possible. A huge, perfectly toothed grin. I'm not sure which startled me more, the size of the grin, the perfection of his orthodontia, or the fact that Jerry could respond to anyone but Ruth. Jerry continued to stare, but now with that nerve-tweaking grin plastered firmly in place, like he didn't have anything else to do until the next order came in. I devoured the meal with gusto, also wanting to get out of this creep fest where Ruth seemed to be the sole beacon of sanity. I checked my watch, still 40 minutes left on the timer, so I decided I'd sort some of my things in the truck. I thanked Ruth and Jerry for their hospitality and said I'd be back to get my laundry in a short while. Something didn't look right. My suspicions were confirmed when I realized that the 2 outside tires on my tractor were flat. I grabbed my flashlight to take a look. Didn't find any punctures, but there seemed to be cracks in the sidewalls of both tires, which was weird because I'd just been in for quarterly maintenance a few weeks ago. I tried calling for a tire guy, but I had no service. I begrudgingly walked back inside and asked Ruth if they had a phone I could use to call a service truck. She offered Eamon's services and their garage to fix whatever issues, but I lied, saying that it was company policy that our trucks only be worked on by approved mechanics and there wasn't going to be any supervisor in to approve until Monday. I called the dispatcher, who said it was going to be hours until they could get a truck down here due to a huge wreck in South Phoenix which had caused the traffic snarl I'd deviated from route to avoid. I verified the address I was at and was advised to get some rest and someone should be there by the morning. Great. As I sorted some things in my truck, I thought back to what I'd overheard Ellie and Eamon talking about, and I decided I'd make sure they knew I wasn't a danger to them. I tucked my kabar in the back of my jeans, in case. I walked back in past the diner area, Jerry's eyes following me along the way, back to the laundry room, and retrieved my things. I went as quickly as I could back to my truck, locking the doors. I was safe. I set to putting away my things and settled in for a nap. I could hear the rumble of other trucks going by on the parkway as I drifted off to sleep. I thought I'd heard taps and whispers. I dreamt of Ellie climbing into my truck and riding me while I slept. She whispered, "Nighty-night, mister." There was a deep booming pounding that jolted me awake. "Hey, buddy, wake up!" I opened the curtains to blind myself with sunlight. It was a service guy, come to replace my tires. I dragged myself together and climbed out of my truck for a look around. In the daylight, the building looked deserted. I signed the paperwork and the guy set to work replacing the 2 ruined tires. I walked up to use the bathroom, but the doors were locked. The windows dusty and cracked. I wiped away the dust to look inside. The building was vacant and looked as if no one had been inside in years. I walked back to the truck and the mechanic said, "Not sure why you parked here, man. This place has been abandoned since the kids killed their parents and a couple drivers back in the 60s. I shook off the explanation, and when he finished, relieved myself in the bushes behind the building and hopped back in my truck, firing it up. My truck smelled of roses. Strange. It usually smelled of tobacco and, well, me. I put a cigarette to my lips and reached in my pocket for my lighter, and it wasn't there. I reached back for the jeans I'd been wearing the night before, and I felt the familiar outline and something else. I pulled out my lighter and lit the cigarette. I reached in the other pocket and felt cotton. I pulled out a pair of peach and white striped panties with an inscription on the waistband in fresh ink. "Come back again sometime, handsome." They were signed, "Yours, Ruth."